right, everyone. The hour is 12:30, so we're going to go ahead and get this started. Thank you so much for joining us to a Business Expo today. My name is Sean Murphy. I have the pleasure of serving as Executive Vice President, CEO of Harris County Medical Society. So if there's anything we can do to help you or answer any questions, please feel free to ask myself or anyone in the blue shirts, as Abuba is so wonderfully modeling right now in front of us. So she hands out the waters. But we appreciate you being here. If you're an HCMS member, thank you so much for your membership. If you are not, we would love to have you become a member and go to the many benefits we have, and also have you support organized medicine. So again, come talk to any of us either after this presentation or before the expo concludes. It now gives me a great privilege to introduce Dr. Eddie Patton. Dr. Patton serves on our board, Harris County Medical Society board, so he's one of my many bosses, and it's a pleasure working with him. He is certified by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology and has additional training and expertise in neuromuscular disorders. Dr. Patton received his medical degree at Wayne State University, where he was recognized with the Distinguished Service Award and the Marjorie Edwards Award for Scholarship and Community Service. He subsequently completed neurology residency training and a neuromuscular disease fellowship at Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Patton received his MBA from Rice University and recently achieved fellowship status with the American College of Healthcare Administration. Dr. Patton practiced in academic, hospital, and private practice settings throughout his career, and he currently practices at UT Health Houston Neuroscience. So without further ado, your moderator for today's panel, Dr. Patton.
Hey, thank you so much, sir, for this year. Thank you so much for that introduction. I knew that was going to happen, even though they warned me about it. So first of all, thank you all for being here. I'm very excited about this panel discussion. As you can tell, did I keep something up? Oh, there we go. Wow. AI is not coming. This isn't something that we're looking down the road for. It's here. And yesterday, I was in the Women speaking at the Texas Pain Conference on AI and scribing. And one thing I took away from the other speakers in the panel discussion was that, we need to embrace this movement that's coming. We need to embrace it, but we also need to be a part of the movement. And so I'm excited to see everyone here. We have the top-notch panel here. And so I'm really stoked about diving into this. One thing, Dr. Kaladi unfortunately had an emergency and he won't be joining us today, but the rest of our panelists are here and excited and ready to go. So I want to go through a couple of just points about how the flow of this will go. Today, we want to touch on a couple of our objectives. We want to review the practice strategies to integrate AI tools into your daily workflow and to enhance operations and clinical outcomes. We're going to talk about AI tools adopted by institutions and how these were rolled out medical staff across practice settings. And we're going to examine how the Texas Responsible Artificial Intelligence Governance Acts will regulate. This was something that were recently passed, how it's going to help as far as regulating AI. So the goal here is I'm going to go through an introduction of our wonderful speakers and panelists here today. And they'll start with one question. And after that round of questioning, we really want this to be an interactive set where you all have an opportunity to ask our great panelists here questions. So after the first round of questions, we'll open up the floor for questions from the audience. And then after that, more time, then we'll go back to more questions after that as well. So, all right. So let's get things going. The first panelist that I'd like to introduce is Dr. Asif Ali. Did I pronounce that correct? All right. Dr. Ali is a cardiovascular specialist with the Houston Cardiology Consultants, and he is a clinical associate professor of cardiovascular medicine at both the University of Texas Medical School and the University of Houston Medical School. He's a member of the Health Technology Advisory Group of the American Heart Association and is a member of the AI Committee and Cardiovascular Metabolic Renal Committee and business leader for AHA Health Technology and Innovation. So I'm going to ask the question after I give an introduction to each panelist. Try to limit it to around 4 minutes just because we want to make sure we have plenty of time. So if I'm being obnoxious and kind of tell you to wrap it up, that's just that I'm keeping a little sour here. All right. So for Dr. Ali, question is, what are examples of AI tools for physicians in the pre-engagement, engagement, and post-engagement points of the patient journey?
Right. So are we on? Yeah. Right. Now we're on. Are we here?
Yeah.
We did. Okay. When I look at the patient-physician relationship, that is the primary relationship. We want to keep that integrity together. So let me make that as a first statement. How are we leveraging these tools? I like to define it and kind of came up with these terms, and you can use whatever term you want, but we need to think about that patient journey and that flow. And I define it as pre-engagement, engagement, and post-engagement. Pre-engagement means before the patient comes and sees you. So there are tools, and these are not algorithms. These are questionnaires. These are exactly like you would conduct your questions to a patient, and based on the response, the next query would come in. So there are tools right now, and I'm going to keep this non-commercial and academic, but there are tools in the pre-engagement before the patient sees you that you can start asking 2 weeks before what their chief complaint is. And based on that, you can generate a note. It's almost akin to an intern taking the first history of that patient. What I've innovated in that space particularly is created filters after that initial information is collected. So we're talking about almost like a SOAP note, subjective, allergies, meds, all the things that we need to know and that we should know before the patient even sees us. There's also the issue of structured and unstructured data prior to the patient seeing us. I know every clinician here gets frustrated when you get a new patient who's been to 5 specialists, 2 ERs, 3 hospitals, 2 urgent cares, and they're coming in with a chief complaint and you have no medical history. So that is what I define in the pre-engagement structured and unstructured data that we can collect through the initial intake, even before you see the patient. Imagine in the future that we will have an AI avatar of yourself do that on a screen, on a patient, on a phone. That is not far-fetched. I'm already doing some data around that. Now, if we have data, we can start creating filters. Those filters are the following: social determinants of health, inclusion-exclusion criteria for clinical trials, making sure that GDMT, guideline-directed medical therapy, for example, the patient says, I have heart failure, you can query to see what medications are on. If they're not on the portfolios of heart failure, it would inform us that they're not on those heart killer meds. I can give you for chronic kidney metabolic, if they have diabetes or hypertension, we should have a urine albumin creatinine ratio and an EGFR, and that will help us make decisions when the patient at point of care. These are just some few examples of things that we're working on now. Then when we see engagement, I mean engagement by ambient listening. So when you're seeing the patient, the ambient listening tools, which is basically scribing your note. But if you look at scripts data, it did not show that the patient journey through that or the physician time was reduced. It reduced burnout, but we still had to conduct the history case. So it still takes the time, but it didn't really save us time except the charting, and that was from the scripts data. And then in post-engagement means everything that happens after the patient leaves you. So after the patient leaves you, that could be remote patient monitoring, that could be chronic conditions that you're evaluating, that can be intake of information. Because at the end of the day, if you don't change the patient's behavior, you're not going to get the outcomes that you want. And that could mean adherence, that could mean different things to you. So that's the pre-engagement, engagement, and post-engagement. And AI will be touching upon each of those.
That's exciting. And I hope a good takeaway that you noticed from this panel is that you are going to hear from experts from all different spectrums along the AI, regulatory or practical experience. So this should be really engaging, and make sure you have your questions ready. All right. So next up, we have Ricardo Clemente. Ricardo is the co-founder and president of Tabia Health, where he leads efforts to transform healthcare delivery through AI-powered solutions. At Tabia Health, he focuses on using AI to optimize care delivery and patient engagement, and helping healthcare providers improve outcomes and operational proficiency. So now moving to kind of the front end of things when it comes along this AI journey. So Ricardo, what are some of the obstacles that you face in getting physicians to adopt AI tools and in practices?
So, thank you very much for the invitation, the pleasure to be here. So when we talk about adoption, and we, now working with many different health systems and health insurance as well, I like to categorize the fact that the hurdles or the difficulties in three main categories. One is usually the risk associated of having AI working with the patient itself. We don't want to make the AI making hallucination, making mistakes that could affect, that patient. That was maybe the big objection I would see from the doctors and the health systems itself. There is always a concern about the workloads. Dr. C, we mentioned, like, everybody's already working a lot with the workload up there. What's the work? How much work do I have to put in to put this to work? Do I need it? It will change my process, will change the way I work today. So that's kind of usually this second biggest objection. And the third is usually IT integration, right? How this will fit my actual IP architecture, how this new capability will actually work within my environments. And our approach to that is do kind of a step-by-step, kind of a maturity level. So when I talk about from a risk perspective, usually we like to start with things that has less risk, but there are simple things like confirming, educating the patient, scheduling. This won't pose any risk from a clinical side. So usually you want to start with those aspects that doesn't bring any kind of a clinical risk on introducing AI. When you talk about the type of tasks, there's a book called Co-Intelligence, kind of define three typical tasks. One are the tasks that you don't want AI to do it. So we have, for example, customers in the oncology side. You don't want to do the first, let's say, onboarding call from staging in diagnosing, call it to be done by AI, that you want to be purely a nurse handling that, for example. So there are tasks you don't want AI at all. There are tasks you can 100% delegate to AI, like confirming or prepping to exam. And there are tasks you want to have the human look. AI can do something, prepare, ask for validation, or AI can do something is they can escalate to a human. So from a risk perspective, I always like to find what are the things that has less risk and what are the tasks that involves less collaboration, and that those usually will help us to go through the workload kind of a hurdle. And then when you go to IT, of course, there's a lot of main, good standards from a data integration perspective. Is never easy. But we do have a lot of good momentum on, making sure that you are connecting the proper way to the EHR and be part of the acquisition. Nobody wants another tool. It's almost like the most invisible those tools are, both from a technology perspective and from a new kind of a process perspective, the better, and the faster the adoption. So that's kind of my take on the three main, let's say, obstacles and how to approach them in a cohesive way.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So we'll go straight down the line here. And next up is part of our panel is Charles Dunham. Sir Charles is a shareholder at Greenberg is it Truick? Truick, LLP. He's a corporate healthcare attorney, providing counsel in business, regulatory, and compliance, as well as reimbursement and white-collar defense matters. And when it comes to AI, of course, the regulatory piece is a big piece of what we're trying to figure out and to navigate. But more specifically today, my first question for you is: are healthcare providers restricted in any way by the new law that was passed, the TRAIGA or TRAIGA law that was recently passed here in Texas with response to using AI?
Thanks, Eddie. Pleasure to be here. I say TRAIGA. TRAIGA. All right. Everybody has different pronunciations of acronym. I guess for those of you who are not familiar with the law, I'll do my best to quickly summarize it since I only have a short period. So, number one, the law is actually framed and structured on EU AI laws, and as well as Colorado, which is another state that's adopted pretty comprehensive law on AI. You're going to see a lot more states doing this as well, and unfortunately, in our system in which 50 states can essentially regulate everyone within their states, you're going to have to understand how to navigate your way through that. And a number of clients who provide services cross-border, and it's just going to be inevitable, just like privacy laws, as an example for you, right? So the TRAIGA itself is intended to address how AI and both developers and deployers of AI could potentially enforce specific categories, impact human behavior, right? You've heard that horrible story about AI driving someone to commit suicide. It's also intended to address discrimination, generally discrimination is at the federal level, and the constitutional protections is the third category. And then, just there's one very specific, it's about inapplicable in this world, but about, manipulation in pornographic and things of that nature, right? Not applicable to the healthcare space. But that's one of the reasons, again, why that law was crafted. And specifically as it pertains to potential application, hospital health systems or any types of licensed practitioners, the answer is yes, it could apply. The reason why it could apply is because it applies to both the developer of the AI utilizing it or the deployer, right? A practitioner and a hospital. However, what's very important to understand, and most laws in this context are actually more civil in nature. This actually has a criminal intent element to it, right? They do actually have to intentionally desire to engage in the conduct that's prohibited, for example, the discrimination, right? I would assume most of us are not intentionally going out there and deploying AI to discriminate. However, we have seen what we would describe as disparity in, as Dr. Ali was talking about, in clinical trials, and federal government, state governments are actually trying to address that, trying to impose standards. It wouldn't apply to that, although if there is something that's intentional, either the developer or the deployer, pulling off of your pre-engagement, right? You're actually using AI to screen folks by race, sex, what have you, and not providing care to them. Well, that would be a violation of this law. But I think, again, the intentional aspect of it is very important to understand. This doesn't create a private right of action. It's AI, the Attorney General would have to enforce. So there's an opportunity for complaints. And again, I'm high leveling this. It's very, my clients do have complaints that are submitted anonymously in Texas medical boards. That's frustrating, right? You don't know who it is, why it is, but in the context, those same type of complaints, even though you might not be violating the law, could go to the Attorney General and could be something that they look into. I think the other important thing to understand about TRAIGA is that its companion bill is actually very directly pointed at healthcare professionals. Right? It specifically obligates you to disclose and obtain consent when you're using AI in diagnosing and treating patients, right? So what does that do? It creates a mandate that similar to whether it's a telemedicine consent, and there's all those examples out there. Genetic testing is another one of those, and how you use that information and obtaining the consent. Ethically, as a law firm, we are required to obtain consent when we use AI and put any any information on clients in the AI systems. We're not mandated by law, but we do it. We impose that. But I think my time's up. But I want to make sure that, again, that companion bill is probably the most direct and is very important when we're advising our clients, about what those consents is, incorporating them into your general consents or specialty treatment consents, as real forward. And more states are passing laws to that effect.
I did not do that intentionally.
It got me stopped that.
Hey, look,
It worked.
but I did want to just real quickly in a few seconds, the consent doesn't specifically say whether it is just a checkbox or any type of consent you have there.
It doesn't expressly define what that consent looks like. Actually, Texas is unique. And again, this illegal knowledge base. Texas is unique. They actually have specific forms if you're engaged in what they call non-traditional or alternative medicine and categorize what that consent looks like. I do a lot of work in the functional medicine space and so on and so forth. Texas is unique in that, but in this case, as it concerned AI, they do not have a specific form. To my understanding, there might be regulations, there may be something that comes out from that, but generally, it would be just like anything. If you're describing risks and benefits associated with particular type of care, I don't think it even goes that far. I think it's just an acknowledgement that you're using AI again, let's be clear, diagnosis and treatment, right? So when talking about pre-engagement, searching, gathering data, I don't believe it rises to that level, the consent at that time. It is when you're using it more as a clinical decision support system, or maybe even software as a medical device, things of that nature, right?
Okay. We'll dive into that a little bit more, a little bit later as well. And next up, we have Dr. Peter McCaffrey. Dr. McCaffrey is an assistant professor of pathology at the University of Texas Medical Branch, as well as the chief AI officer at UTMB Health. Dr. McCaffrey's work focuses on the data management, analytics, utilization, imaging, and laboratory testing data, including governance, extraction, and modeling. Peter received his MD from Johns Hopkins and completed residency in clinical pathology and laboratory medicine and Mass General Hospital. So, Peter, we've heard about new UT-wide initiatives around AI. Can you tell us more about these system-based initiatives, and what are the strategic goals that you have with these initiatives? What are you aiming to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you and for inviting me. Thanks everyone for coming. It's nice to be here. Yeah, so the main initiative that comes to mind that would really be in line with this is something called UT Real Health AI. As anyone might have heard of this, it's new, but it's the University of Texas Research, Engineering, and Application Laboratory for Healthcare AI. And it's actually a new sort of UT system-wide initiative funded in part by the Board of Regents and in part by legislative appropriations in the state of Texas in this last budgetary cycle. And part of the impetus for why it exists was this discussion about TRAIGA, which is that lots of requirements are coming to healthcare, and it's not always clear what those exactly mean for us. And when me and a few others testified before, the Texas House last spring, I just felt, what do you think about AI? Sort of informational as to what are your thoughts on where I was going. The theme that we reiterated that I think is part of the reason why this initiative exists was that to not have this be clarified, either by example or by, I guess, a detailed inventory or law, may have the adverse effect of amplifying disparities in care rather than normalizing them. Because if you think about it, the only places that have a team of people who can be devoted to navigating these complexities are well-resourced institutions, really. And so if that is it's sort of like its own N of one initiative to do, then that's the only place that will happen. So if you're a small clinic in West Texas, for example, then, boost, I guess it's just going to be harder for you to deploy these tools. And if the tools are themselves valuable, then this creates a new access disparity, actually. And so the main thrust of this was to say one of our big promises was to create a statewide inventory, starting with UT system, but it to be open source, modeled elsewhere, an inventory of AI tools, yes, but coupled with the procedure and the technical systems to do not just inventory, but oversight, lifecycle management, and tracking, and so forth. Part of it is that we need to do this anyway. UTMB, MD Anderson, we're all doing it. But we want it to be something that others can lean on if they don't have to resource their own team de novo to do it. That seems kind of wasteful to engage in, and we can smoothen that process a bit. The other theme was just about then on the back of that, driving access to AI for Texans, whether they do patients or they do providing. And some of these are simple mandates. Like one thing we've done as a group is provide an option for HIPAA, FERPA compliant chat and chat tools to everyone in the UT system. So like without paying anything, pre-negotiated pricing, all there. And just say we can have common, universally available tools, common ways, common protocols, and transparency so that AI can make it to deployment, oversight can happen, lifecycle can happen, all these things in a standardized way, more or less. That doesn't mean every place has to resource their own. And that's really the intent of it. And it's all 8 of UP system health-based institutions equally part of this. And we basically are running from this last July to July 2 years from this last as our biennial kind of phase. And then we'll see what the future is after that in the go to appropriation begin.
Excellent. Exciting work. So you all have heard from all different aspects of AI, from actual product development, from clinician using AI, attorney done here talking about the regulatory piece, and also AI from a system level. So I'd like to open up just for the first round of questions. If anyone has any questions before I ask any additional questions from the audience. We'll go here, then here.
I don't know if AI has made our life easy or not. We use Epic and we use Adler. And as far as reporting and typing it, but there is so much garbage in and garbage out. I mean, if patient has using sought after, every day for every patient I did 100 notification. He got this thing through, he went there. How can I incorporate that knowledge which has been given to me is now burden on me to incorporate in the patient's visit? I don't have time to be 100 notification.
Do you want to? All right. Yeah. I will. So this is called depth by data. That's the term. Here. When we look at artificial intelligence, I'll give Pat Dunn, the program director of the American Heart Association, credit on this. I was you credit, Rich, dude. But when you look at AI models, it's always about asking the right question. That's where it starts and that's where it ends. People call it prompt engineering. That's a term. It's always ask the right question. So the issue right now is we're in a transition phase where you're going to have to coexist with what these bigger entities are ending you right now until these large language models start hearing your frustrations and start adapting these models to streamline the process. And any technology, when we enter, and this has been proven, it's not my opinion, it's no one's opinion here, it's just when we enter technology, there's very early adopters, usually in a Gaussian curve, like 2.5%. Don't care what it is, they just want it. And then there's some of us who are going to be early adopters, mid adopters. Some people are like, I don't want any of this because I've been doing it this way and it works for me. Problem with that, you could even look at initiatives like get with the guidelines. We don't get with the guidelines. That's an issue. And that's not, again, my opinion. You look at adoption of any clinical trial, it takes us about 5 to 10 years. And that's given us I'm being generous with those data from TRAIGA and from New England Journal, actually. Where these models like these AI tools, we're going to go through in a period of time, whether we like it or not, because cat's already out of the bag. I think the part here is you have all these stakeholders who are part of this AI group, but it's the physicians. We have to be ahead of this. We can't make the same mistakes we did with EMRs back in the day. I didn't go do this because, I don't get paid for these things. I'm doing it because I think the physicians need to be at the table and calling out the guardrails like we talked about.
AI, there's already inherent biases in the system, period. You can look at any of the journals out there and look at, inequities and biases. It already exists. The point is that we need to be at the table to point it out and correct the large language models to the point where we have efficiencies. So it's up to us to be involved and engaged and voicing these. And these aren't opinions, by the way. These are, you're in the trenches. I'm in the trenches. I'm a practicing physician. I'm here with you. So we need to be voicing that and creating that change.
No, really. Anyone else want to add? Oh, okay.
I would just say briefly, to echo those points. I think what this reflects, this sort of challenge that the provider has and operate by these tools, is that we, as a broader health community, kind of say two contradictory things. We say, why aren't you using more AI? Automate. But then the second the possible liability occurs, it's like, oh, it's Tim. Make sure you confirm everything 18 times. And this is just simply not, either the tools have to improve or our understanding of the legality has to change, but we can't be dumping more things on you to automate, but then also be in the loop of all the time. It seems like there's no outcome but this that it will create.
And just to wrap on that paradox, I think it's interesting because everybody said, I want to just use that. That's it. And then in your specific case, it produces a text and puts you back a note, which is 100 pages, and you will never use it. If you have a different interface, like summarize the key points, or just let me know this is even that. But the fact, that's kind of the paradox we're living. We're like, I don't want to use another system. So you kind of have to adapt and kind of force it back in a way that's not useful. So when we were, for example, we had that discussion, way to build reports. I feel we're too much like live in the world that we have the reports in a way, but with Gen AI, if we just have the data and the prompts that we can ask the question we want, we would get the answer. But we are already in the frame, and our ability to kind of do small steps from an innovation perspective, which is kind of the way we're doing because of the risk I talk about. But at the time, that limits and create other problems. So that's kind of I feel the paradox that really does.
Yeah, it's I like using the term augmented intelligence because we have to let these tools, and we have to be a part of the training process, make sure that we keep the guard there.
I have two questions. The GC County Medical Society have a list or 10 of available AI for do it for a DT initiative the first when kind of summarize it all. And then number two, are there other areas where we should not use it? And mention kind of onboarding complicated patients as a lay of private practice owners. I mean, there will be a lot of AI in the process, so where should be in the AI?
I'll tackle the first part of that. So I've been working with Hoover and Harris County. They'll get these tools are coming out very fast, and so, for instance, if you just take Trident, for instance, there are a number of things on the market, and it's hard to do it. You can compare certain aspects of the tool, but from even on a national level, like AMA, even TMA, and now Harris County, we're all trying to figure out how do we help clinicians figure out what's the best tool for you. But I don't think we're there yet, but we'll work for a bit. As far as your second question, or do you want to say anything from the system level, or UT, if there's anything like us?
Just that we may be the first to kind of put it out there, depending on how fast we go, but we're not the only. I mean, I know of others, even who've gotten funding, especially even TMC, to do this kind of thing. And I think the more the merrier. Hopefully, ultimately, we'll all kind of federate. But it would be, if it takes less than then other, it'll be very slow pipeline. But yeah, but this
and just because of Uba's in the back there, Harris County Medical Society is putting together an AI task force. So that AI task force, and I'm just letting Uba know, this is a great question here, and that's what the task force is supposed to do. There needs to be a regulatory committee, even in Harris County. We're doing that, the American Heart Association. There's other groups that are vetting these companies, but to date, there isn't a standard care kind of threshold. Each company has to
go through their own vetting process. We believe that the AHA, we had an ethics committee in DC that I attended. These are with the who's who from AWS, from OpenAI, all the groups were represented. First start with an ethical framework. How are we addressing inclusivity? How are we addressing gender disparities? How are we addressing, who gets access, who doesn't get access? Everyone should have access. This should be a democratization. So these conversations need to start with an ethical framework of the patient-physician relationship, and then build on what should be considered standard of care, okay, with the guidelines, GDMT. But we have to call out what it is today, which are inherent biases and areas that from an ethical framework and build upon that. And so I think that's what Harris County Medical Society has been together, is a committee to help our members understand. And you have all the stakeholders here, because it's not just from the clinician, it's from regulatory, it's from research. There's a whole lot of elements that are put into this, and that's what that committee is supposed to represent.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. So we have a EMR, we said our AI tools. So as an example, we get medical records from our clinics and hospitals, and the tool summary, it does same people facts summary. So suppose they miss something, who has arrived? But here's where the time 300 pages, would you want to say that? This is the leader person. Very the person you eat.
And that'll be a question later on, so you go ahead and figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a can of worms right there. The tools themselves, their functionality is intended to summarize and give you feedback versus just summarizing the information, right? So summarizing the information and it missing something. You as a clinician, again, this is still to be vetted out in the courts, to be honest with you. Malpractice, we can get into that. Standard of care, reasonable medical practice, medical judgment, all of those. When you otherwise use that tool, that is not giving you some diagnostic or treatment directive, right, in where you would need to use your own medical profession to. You're relying upon that information. And in that instance, in relying upon that, you would make the argument that the practitioner themselves, just like, and then it's always about analogy, but what if the patient didn't tell you about a particular condition? What if the what if the hospital failed to provide 10 pages, right? These are things that are outside of your control. And in my opinion, would be arguments that we would make that wouldn't fall on you as a practitioner to have failed and engaged in a malpractice, right? Now, flipping that to now you have whatever that information is, or you're using that tool for the diagnostic and treatment. Under decision support, it's something that's saying this is a diagnosis. That we see this in pathology, we know we've been talking about this. And what is the current landscape? The current landscape is you probably would be subject to malpractice should you not otherwise exercise your own review of that information, of that clinical information, of that slide, of that whatever. And the reason being is even the AI law that we're talking about here in Texas, that law says you need to get consent, but here's the other layer, which we're going to talk about later on. But you also, as a practitioner, must review that the underlying information that went into using that tool. If you don't, I think that's created, unfortunately, in the state, a basis for a malpractice suit. So, do you appreciate the distinction between the two? I do believe that there are things that are out of your control. And would the developer of the AI that's running that's scanning the records, that's summarizing them, potentially be subject to a lawsuit? Yeah, we've seen that. We have seen lawsuits and across the country on that particular issue. They've even seen some lawsuits that are trying to slap the developer of the software and the AI or whatever as a malpractice lawsuit. And there was one case out of Alabama that basically said, well, you can't sue software developer under a malpractice lawsuit because that's only applicable to licensed practitioners. That was just a failure of filing the lawsuit and the complaint improperly. But we're going to, unfortunately, see a new arena of litigation that will define malpractice, that will define who's responsible, the practitioner or the software developer. My clients that I'm working with, whether they're large hospitals or health systems, we're endemic, practices and group practices, we're vetting the AI, like real diligence on that. And we're drafting and negotiating contracts that seek to obtain indemnification, seeking to obtain indemnification for events like that, for failure of the systems. I think one of the things that we were talking about, the biases, and one of the biggest issues with AI right now is, are you relying upon, and these systems only work with data, sir, you said garbage in, garbage out, that's an old phrase. But how do you actually validate the data that's getting utilized to develop those tools? That's a huge thing. I have a client right now that's pretty much going out there and holding themselves out at, we're validating the data before you, developer, use it, right? Because that's critical. So what are you paying, millions of dollars for sometimes useless information? So there's a lot to that. I know I kind of threw a lot at you, but that's, this is an arena where we're tracking it. That's the best thing I can give you is a specific, interpretation of that event. But I do believe it likens to like what we've seen in the past report.
And I think it's just that cardiologist says patient is not smoker, nephrologist not says patient is smoking. So, contradicting information.
So now, then part of that too is, I was just saying, the three words I want you to remember in this AI world: trust but verify. Yes. That is the correction. That's exactly what I was just about to say. I say trust and verify. Trust but verify. What's that, right? Yeah, you have to verify. Remember, these are machine learning models. This is 100 notes a day. What's the difference? We are actually seeing things. No, I understand. But there's a thing, I don't even think. But the thing about these models, for instance, you take hallucinations, for instance. Hallucinations where the software would just make up something. That's a product of how they're trained, because the products are trained not to be wrong. So where I can just say, I don't know, or I messed up, they're trained to not make mistakes. So rather than say, I don't know, they'll just add to something. I scribed a note, and my nurse practitioner pointed out where in my history of Presidential, it said something like I was sending the patient for milk process. And I said, well, where did this come from? But that's why the other thing that I like to dance whenever I these out to trust and verify is the human aspect is very important, meaning that these systems do work well. They learn, they get better, but the human aspect is still important. I mean, we have to oversee it. You have to verify. You have to go back in and ask that smoker, are you really smoking? And then document it. No, this patient is not a smoker. All right. We'll go to the next question there.
This question concerns how you think between augmented intelligence, as I mentioned, versus artificial intelligence. The patients hear artificial intelligence, they have one idea. A lot of time we're discussing things in elaborate and it's augmented. So how all your opinion of the difference in similarity and how we sort of narrow it up, make sure patients understand what we're saying, really AI. Okay.
So even AI, I think there's a lot of confusion on how you define AI. That's kind of my background. I'm kind of an engineer, and AI used to have, I feel like, different kind of a meaning a couple years ago. I think when people say AI now, they're talking about more the Gen AI, the LLM models. Not, it could be special assistants, could be machine learning, big learning. There's a lot of into it. So now when people say AI, most of them, I think, are referencing the Gen AI, the generative AI, that's come up, with ChatGPT and all that, those models. So I don't think the way it's used today is not the formal definition of AI, which is broader than the Gen AI itself. And when we go to the augmented intelligence, or there's a term called co-intelligence, it's more how you combine. That's kind of the place where I think is the right way to go, is how you combine the humans and the AI into a system that is producing way better value. So that's kind of the way I see today those terms being used. Like Gen AI is really more like AI watching the Gen AI kind of context, and the augmented intelligence, the co-intelligence, more like how you combine in a process, or like a system that combines both the human aspect and the AI aspect, producing a better and more efficient kind of outcome quality.
Yeah. I would just say that I see two conversations that happen on this. So when you think of just the broad spectrum of healthcare as a system, so we on the hospital side always tend to bias towards augmentation of what we think we already can do and should always own doing. It's probably the right thing to do given, variability in performance of these tools and so forth. But patients often, they care when you use AI on them, but they don't have the liabilities you have about themselves. They would sometimes rather, they just want access, If you were to go and say, what do people want out of healthcare? In a nutshell, I want access to inference at any time, so anything I need. And the reality is we will we could train every clinician, nurse, PA, et cetera, we could get our hands on, will never, ever come close to a fractional ability to sustain that demand without at least automation or augmentation, but frankly, automation outright in many cases. And for good or for bad, even with the damages it has, potentially. What we see even with the ChatGPT, the GPT-5 launch, from the market, from the non-medical market is, I'm just going to ask Chat about this, because if I can do it now, and you're going to make me go through some gymnastics, like get an appointment and come down there, not doing it. And I think that we can say that's not good, but it is real. And I think the reality is that we are always biased towards augmentation. But again, the patients would say, I don't really care what you call it. I just want what I need when I want it. And you've never been able to provide this healthcare on the whole very well. So we got to kind of fill that gap somehow. And it will be through automation, at least in large part, I think.
All right. So what I want to do now, let's go through one more round of questions. We'll do a quick round. So maybe leave limit Jackson maybe a minute. And then that way we can finish up with more questions from the audience. So if you have questions, we'll go ahead and get them together. We'll go through a couple more questions here, and then we'll finish up with the audience questions. So my first one, we'll start off with Dr. Ali. So you've led some research and clinical validation efforts for AI tools with, is it called Sino Research Institute?
Sino Research Institute.
Yeah. So can you just tell us a little bit more about some of that implications, Brick?
Yes, so my academic research has been really focused a lot on AI and how do we implement it in medicine as whole. And you get very short time, so I'll just touch upon a few. We just published data at American Heart Association Scientific Sessions 2024, also published in Circulation on evaluating the clinical reasoning of ChatGPT-4, Grok, and Gemini in different fields of cardiology. So I was the PI on that. So we basically looked at taking very difficult questions, we know clinical case studies, and we ran them through Grok, Gemini, and ChatGPT to see what would be the output. We wanted to know the differential diagnosis and the treatment. I can tell you ChatGPT-4 did the best, but we're repeating that as these LLM models get better. They weren't quite there yet. They're about 90%, but that's not good enough when you're dealing with healthcare. We just also published a brief review of primer key terminology for AI and machine learning in hypertension. If you really want to know some just basic terminology, that's actually a pretty good paper. It's published in Hypertension, HA Journal 2025. And I also want to point out that mental health is a key part of using AI. So mental health applications in generative AI LLM in the United States. That's in an International Journal of Environmental Research, Public Health 2025. So my motivation is really make sure that we're applying AI, health equity, inclusivity. So Sino Research Institute stands for Clinical Research Inclusivity.
I just want to give a shout out to Maurice Nassim. He built me a digital technology innovation center. So we have our own cardiac MRI, cardiac CT, echocardiogram, and even mammograms. So you wonder, why is a cardiologist interested in mammograms? Because in women's breast tissue, if you see calcifications, not in the breast tissue, calcifications in the arteries of the breast, there's a very high correlation to coronary artery disease. That came out in the American Heart Association. It was a late-breaking trial last year. So we want to look at all of these diagnostic imaging. How can AI look at all of the different touch points to improve, for example, women's health and heart disease, which is a big initiative.
All right. So we'll go right down the line there to Ricardo, and tell us a couple of solutions. What are you seeing as far as from a developmental standpoint that are really helping patients and helping physicians, and how do you safeguard those things when it comes to actually taking these applications and putting them into the clinic?
Okay. I'll use some of the pre-engagement, engagement, post-engagement kind of a journey, and even some real examples. So to start with, for example, is we want to find patients that will be eligible for lung screening. Can it connect to the EHR? Find the patients that are eligible. According to some guidelines, it requires to know how many packs of cigarettes they had actually smoked. That information is not there. So we can put an AI agent to text them or call them, verify that information. And if they qualify, then they'll put them on care pathway that, that follows the NCCN guidelines for diagnosis staging of that lung cancer. Make sure he will follow all the necessary steps, helping nothing will miss, tracking the time, make sure, we're doing this as fast as possible. Let's kind of pretend it was diagnosed and he is starting chemo. And then before going to a section, we want to make sure we evaluate their toxicity level, for example. So use a specific validated questionnaire that's not there. So we're not doing our own judgment. We're just making the agent to apply the questionnaire. If the score is high enough, then we alert the nurse, hey, their patient toxicity level is high, call him, validate, that's the example, human in the loop, and he cannot be coming, to the session 2 days before. Of course, there's a economical value on that as well. Some of those, drugs are fractionated, you're not moving then, and of course, you're tipping the patient in a good shape. It's just a bit high, and then after that, you can, let's say it comes back after a week, now it's good, it does a section, and then you want to do some kind of navigation work, and then that will pop up with the nurse, will be the session you used to do. We just kind of orchestrated that task to happen in the right time, and that to be captured the right way. You can build for a principal, the navigations example. It's another, the problem we have. So this kind of are the examples. Your questions on the specific talk. So we as the company decide to be out of any diagnosis and put support that's regulated that will qualify as a software as a medical device. You can give support, so we're not there every time. If you try, you can. There's a lot of technical things you can do. The quad rails you can use, what we call the RAG system or AIG. So everything that we put as a knowledge base there, AI agents can use to respond. Everything that's outside there, they say, I cannot access. You want me to put in touch with the staff member? Yes or no. So there's technical ways you can limit and put the quad rails. And we try to use always tools that are already validated, like American Heart Association Care Pathways and CCN Care Pathways. The questionnaires that are already validated, and always bring up to a nurse or bring up to a staff member that go from there. You won't have any kind of
All right. Basically, so turning down in 2 minutes. Who's gonna regulate this? The federal government or the state?
I don't know that the federal government can do anything right now. So, that level. I mean, we are seeing, obviously, that the states have taken this into their own hands. So, again, I use the example of just personally identifiable information, biometric data, things of that nature are... Congress had tried to regulate. There've been multiple bills out there to regulate that type of area, and it just doesn't work. And so states have taken it into their own hands and passed some pretty stringent laws. And a lot of it reflective of what's going on in the EU with GDPR and so on and so forth. So I do think that the states are going to ultimately regulate it with more efficiency, as probably the best word. There's going to be some effectiveness, but is the right word. But the one thing I did want to touch upon, and outside of that, I mean, you just have to track it, right? I mean, there's some piece of the puzzle where we can persuade legislatures, and we have offices in all major markets in the U.S. So we have government relations side, and we do that type of work, and working not only to lobby but also help with the regulators and drafting on those. Well, it's a pretty complex system, but can be effective if you're in there and a voice. What I wanted to say on because I knew my question before was about the lawsuits and liability. And I like to say things controversial. So, and it goes to your point of it is coming, it's here, where you are going to be utilizing it. I've already seen lawsuits that are essentially saying you have this clinical decision support system where you have these AI tools at your disposal. We didn't use it. Yeah. And well, as a result, you missed this or didn't diagnose this, which that tool could have done. I think that as more adoption of these AI tools exists, you're going to see more of those lawsuits, and you're going to see this balance of, well, I'm getting 100 pings. What do I know is worth it or not? You're also saying that I need to review this information. That's all well and good. I think that I think where you're going to see the most lawsuits is you had it at your disposal and you did. Yeah. May I had just a data point on usage? It's a report came out of from Google, a survey. They surveyed 605 C-levels here for large health systems. 44% said that they're already using AI agents in production. Mm-hmm. It can be misleading because the top two categories are tech support and cybersecurity, but the third category, another 44%, the 44% already using in production for patient engagement. So it's not coming; it's already here.
Already here. And that we can bring it to wrap things up here. When you look at world without AI on a large scale, system level or clinic level, how do you incorporate that into the current workflow so that it doesn't become just one more thing that we have to do? How do you incorporate it to make it an easy flow into what physicians are already doing?
Yeah, I think there's essentially two ways to do it. I'll put a threshold out there so I can establish an above and below threshold setting. The threshold to me would be, there's this mantra in healthcare of everything is under the workflow. Don't touch the workflow. Don't change the workflow. True, unless you can just get rid of the workflow, which is an important thing, because in a legacy of meaningful use, we're drowning in workflows. And there's an essential question of like, what if we just didn't do it at all anymore or automated the whole thing? And automating a thing that is inherently suboptimal is nobody's win at all. I think I've seen a lot of institutions, ours and others, that have a hard time just acknowledging that. The workflow isn't the thing. The goal is the thing, actually. And if the workflow is not aligned, get rid of it. Beyond that, it goes to things that AI has illuminated that we have failed to do this a lot, which is understand the workflows before we do things. And take AI off the table, how many hospitals really have a function where they try to understand their workflows and how things really operate? I mean, oftentimes it's non-standardized, tribal, immaterial, and so forth. It's critical now, but I would say it's always was critical. This is just an impetus for us to reflect on it. We should have been doing it the whole time, but now we absolutely have to do it. So probably good for us to do it.
Yeah, excellent. We're gonna take a question here. All right. So, what are the things that I think
hadn't heard anything about. It is the use of AI by insurance companies or other things to deny medications, or claims, to deny unsteady imaging. You get all the extents where no one's going to look at it and just automatically come back. It's a denial and no one is responsible here. And that's affecting the patient here and who is responsible for that and who's rated.
There's AI models that have LLMs. So ultimately, you're going to use your AI model to go to their LLM, to their AI model, and they're just going to hash the AI models. There are definitely AI models out there that can, but it is based again by asking the right questions. So that depends on the data that you provided your AI model to be able to make the decision to attack their, or to submit. Look, I'm a physician, so to submit, I use some words against some of but to submit your claims, and ultimately it's going to just be a battle of LLM models. But Charles, you want to say that?
Yeah. I mean, this is an area where we practice a lot, and it is an aggravation to the delivery of care. So I'll say a couple of things. I have yet, and if anyone wants to file a lawsuit against an insurance company for acting in the corporate practice of medicine as a violation, let's do it. Number two, there are laws that are being passed. In fact, Texas being passed with one of the laws, basically saying that in California, the number of states, they're passing laws saying that the payers cannot use AI to make treatments of medical necessity. That in fact, they have to have a physician or an appropriate practitioner make that determination. I can tell you that that's not happening, because when I asked them to provide the name and the so on and so forth of who that reviewer was, they won't do it until I sue them, because that's just how it goes. But they have to, and these laws are being passed for that reason in the states. So there are some protections, but I do agree that it will be this battle of the bots. And ultimately, there's numerous companies out there that are trying to figure out how to efficiently tape medical records and submit them in response to claim denials or PPUR and prepayment reviews and all of that. But it is a frustrating process that I represent the providers and suppliers on that side of it. But there are lots that are being passed to address that very thing. One last thing I'll say, their federal CMS said during the Biden administration, you can't use AI to make those decisions for medical necessity and denying care, especially in prior authorizations. They said, we can't stop you from using it, but you ultimately have to follow our determinations of medical necessity. The Trump administration just came out 2 weeks ago saying in 2026, they're going to use AI to figure out how to deny claims for max. I mean, 6 states, one of them made cuts.
Carl, real quick, just to acknowledge the comment that you were just putting technology to augment the process that was already broken, right? So just in the sense of the process was already broken. It's true. We're just putting technology to make it worse. That is it.
So please join me in AI acquisition and AI for I know this is an exciting topic here. We probably could go another hour with this panel, but please join me in thanking our panelists for keeping out today. Thank you all for joining us. So if you enjoyed this session, let Sean and we go, wait, we're not done yet. Just not done yet. Go ahead, Sean.
Real quick things to go over. First off, if you want more AI resources, there is a QR code on the pink sheet of paper you have. Take a photo of that and follow that. That'll link you to the HCMS website. We actually have a checklist. Now listen, if you're here today and you're saying, wow, this seems very overwhelming, I promise you are not alone. All right. A lot of people think that way. So keep coming to these meetings. We not only have informative panels, but you can talk to your colleagues and say, what are you using? What's working for you? That's one of the benefits of organized medicine. I also want to let you know, every one of the bills described here, whether it's AI doing prior law, the Texas Medical Association and Harris County Medical Society, we are advocating for physicians. We do not want AI to replace physicians. We want there to be reasonable regulations and laws put in place to make sure proper patient care is administered whenever your patients come and see you. So by being a member, you support those efforts. We are the voice of physicians, whether it's AI or any other topic. So with that being said, if you have a question for any of our panelists, feel free to come up and talk to me.